Hey guys, my name is VaulSC, hope that you are doing well. In this video we're going to be taking a look at a game of Conquest, the last argument of kings. It's going to be between my faction, the 100 Kingdoms, against Chris with his Spires. Really looking forward to this match. It's the first game after the recent patch for February that Priory put out. You can see my other video about that. A lot of stuff in the game has changed and most of it is for the better. They did really address a lot of the problems with some regiments being too strong, some being too weak, and I'm just stoked about it. The more they think about it, the happier I am that we're playing a game that has that kind of support. There's more to do, of course, but at the moment everybody's just looking forward to trying the new stuff. So I'm incorporating a couple of new ideas into my lists, so we may as well just jump straight into them. This one's going to be on head-to-head, by the way, and it's at 2,000 points, so let's have a look. Now, the Order of the Crimson Tower have gone from 4 wounds up to 5 wounds, as I suggested they ought to in my wish listing video last December. And it just feels really good to dust them off the shelf because they're such a cool-looking unit. I don't really feel a need to give this guy any upgrades, although the nature of characters and dueling has changed. It's just, I don't feel like he particularly needs much of this stuff. One upgrade that I have been slightly more interested in is this one, Eccentric Fighting Style. And the cool thing about it is that you don't need a retinue or anything for it. So you can just chuck it on a character like this, and he's already quite a strong character for close combat because he has Clash 4, and going up to 8 attacks with Terrifying 1's really, really nice. But didn't really have the points for that this time. It makes him a little bit vulnerable against enemy duels, but with Defense 4 and Wound 6, typically you can survive even when you're having to re-roll your own defense rolls. But anyway, running the naked version just because I need the points. Order of the Ashen Dawn have lost Wedge, and additional stands are more expensive, but if you don't bother taking any additional stands, just the basic 3 of them are still, in my opinion, the best regiment in the game. I mean, the other contenders before the patch were the Tontor and the Thunder Riders. Both of those have been nerfed. So the Order of the Ashen Dawn, even without that additional wedge bonus, which I didn't often use that much anyway, they're still absolutely fantastic. They ought to have a standard bearer, just couldn't afford it. I really wanted to spend elsewhere. Imperial Officer, so this is the new thing for me, really. He can no longer use the medium category for scoring because he just takes on the category of the unit that he's in. So when he goes into the Ranger Corps, which is where I normally want him, he's going to be light. So we have to do something different in terms of the role. So I've decided to spend up large, put Akelus there, and give him Marksmanship, and take both of the battlefield drills for shooting, and then take a larger than normal IRC group. There's 4 of them here. And the thinking is that with Akelus, you can activate your commander card, your Imperial Officer card, and give them the whole unit the rerolls on the 6s. And then because of the new changes to the rules, you can immediately draw your next card and play it if it's the regiment your character is in. So you activate the officer first, you pop Akelus, then the Rangers activate. They get a free reform with Liquid Formation. And then they can use one of the draw events that he's given them, either Fire in Advance or the Aim for the Head, Murderous Volley type thing. And then they're all Barrage 3, Volley 3. The officer gets his shots as well, and they're re-rolling 6s. So that's quite a lot of damage, and the range is pretty good. 16 on them and 20 for the officer. So the thinking is that you can really just pepper units from a long way away and then move back with Fire in Advance. Or as long as they're not Old Dominion or something like that, you could actually move into within 12, which is quite doable given their speed, and force them to take resolve checks for the shooting as well. So that's the idea here. I'm going to try and get a couple of games off with this. The other method for the officer that I'm interested in is putting him with a heavy infantry unit, because he's giving them forward force now, which is flank. So putting him in a heavy unit allows for some more combos. He can take more heirlooms than before, so you can even do something like Standard of Steel plus Armor of Dominion, and you take the battlefield drills like Brace for Impact on your feet, and that starts to become quite tanky. So we'll try that next game. Steel Legion, very, very strong late game unit as always, taking the Drillmaster since there's 5 of them. Now the Mounted Noble Lord, you might have seen my previous game against Nords where I tried this setup, but I had 4 Household Knights. I feel like with Knights, it's really a matter of how much you invest in them and then playing them appropriately for the amount that you've invested in them. So if you, for example, don't use Veterans, as I'm not using it up here, I'm Relentless Drill, a big fanboy of Relentless Drill. If you're not using Veterans and you're not giving them the Lord and the upgrade and Olefant Roar, and say there's just 3 of them here, that's really just a harassment unit or a screening unit or something to stand on a zone at 140 points. But if you spend up on like the Warlord plus the veterans, you get the tip of the lance, and you have the 20 champion. If you spend everything on them, then they absolutely wreck face. But after they've been charged, they can lose in the long run, and they become very expensive there. So what I'm trying at the moment is just sort of the cheapest version that I can, while still making it possible for them to do damage to an enemy unit. The Lord with Olefant's Roar are the only two upgrades really that I'm adding in there. I'm not even bothering with the 20 champion. I'm not bothering with Tip of the Lance. They're not veterans, etc., etc. One small change, though, is that there's this new Duelist weapon art for the Noble Lord. And giving him Clash means that he's just going to be slightly more effective on the impacts. And that's the main thing he's going to be doing anyway. But the other thing about Knights is that they're very fast. If they march charge something and it's got a character in it, well, next turn, if you win the roll, you can activate the Lord, do a duel with his Clash 4, quite useful, and then activate the Knights immediately afterwards. So he's quite a good character hunter. Your basic men-at-arms, these guys could easily just be crossbowmen, but I'm starting to feel like with the recent changes, scoring units are very important now, because like my Theist priest can't score, my Imperial officer can't score, so I need to put in a few guys that can actually move on to a zone. The part of the thinking here is that if you get into the late game and you've got a very powerful unit which has destroyed the enemy on that particular flank that it's on, it can't move off the objective because you need the points. So having a unit like Men-at-Arms is really crucial there, because you can move that unit on to take over the scoring duties and just camp, and then the troops that you use to control that flank will move off it and attack somewhere else. And we're going to see a great example of that in this particular game. Now, the other thing over here is the Theist Priest. This is the same setup that I've always run. Standard Bearer Servite, 5 Militia, Elysian Fragment focused. He doesn't have to take Retinue anymore. That is built into his profile at Priest 6, so count him as having Arcane 1. That's what I would have taken anyway. This is still a pretty expensive setup, as you can see here. We're talking about like 310 points, if I'm doing the math right. So that is a big investment. And it can't even score, and some people are saying that the Priest is not really a great option now, that it just can't rack up those points early game, or just camp an objective and sort of zone them out with Elysian Fragment. But I still think it's worth trying, because the big difference now is that you can draw the Priest card, you can put Blessed on your own unit, and with Devout that's very easy to do. Focused certainly helps that as well. And then you use Elysian Fragment, and then you immediately activate the Militia. They charge, and they do approximately 20 wounds on whatever you're charging, unless they've got evasion. So the threat of that is massive, and what you can potentially do is march the Militia up at the end of your turn, so it's facing something that your opponent can't afford to lose. And if you go elsewhere in the battlefield and also put something else in charge range, that kind of fork there can be just a massive threat and force your opponent to make some really bad decisions. So I think there is a lot of merit to the Priest. The other thing about the Priest, obviously, is that he still has the ability to put Focused on that and score approximately 4 or 5 hits with Holy Fire, which doubles up to 8 to 10 hits, which can be really powerful as well. Now, my opponent going with the Directorate, this is the one which basically gives you the ability to have this burnout event on 1 unit per turn, which is kind of crazy. There's also the ability to change units to medium for scoring, which I think is really, really cool too. So he's going with the Biomancer Warlord. This actually allows him to put his Biomancies onto the units that are on a zone. Even if you like drive over to an enemy zone, that can work. And of course, lethal demise on the big unit of force-grown drones. Only 7. I say the word only because I'm so used to seeing like 12 of them there. But Master of Flesh also, that's there for just a bit more utility out of the Biomancer. I'm not going to go through all the Biomancies. Spires, I don't really understand them very well. We'll just sort of talk about what happens during the game. Abomination, you've got a new model, but it's still the same old rules. It's just so fast, but so flimsy. Not many people think this is a top-tier monster, but it has its useful applications in Spires. And then the idea of the rest of this list is just to try and use Burnout at some point and support them with the Marksman clones. I love Marksman clones. I think they're really, really effective. And the medium, so they can score in your sort of deep backline objective zones and then move everything else out. High Clone Executor, got to watch out for him. He's got Cascading Degeneration, and these Vanguard clones here can get Bastion. So they can be a little bit tough to kill, and then if you start the turn in combat with them, you take the Cascading Degeneration. They're movement 6, and they've got Vanguard. So very, very scary stuff. So when I saw his army list, I thought, yeah, it was kind of freaking out actually, because I've got a lot of vulnerable, fragile sort of stuff in my army list, which doesn't really want to get hit by Strix with Burnout, for example, or even just the brute drones. So even though they take damage when they attack you, so long as he trades correctly, that can be a real problem. But bonus for me is that I do have a lot of high defense stuff, in the sense that I've got the Knights, the Crimson Tower, Ashen Dawn, even the Men-at-Arms are kind of resilient. So that's the sort of stuff I want to be facing off against, you know, Cascading Degeneration and Lethal Demise, etc. So this is my list of cards, but this group here is what I'll be bringing on the first turn. My opponent will also be bringing on 5 cards, so I'm trying to lose the roll at this point. I think throughout this game, I managed to like win one important supremacy roll, but lost the rest of them. And when I say lost them, I mean, you know, not getting the outcome I wanted. Like if you're trying to go second and you roll a 1 and your opponent rolls a 6, that is a loss, because you know you don't want to be going first. Anyhow, that's my order. We're just going to try and get the Rangers on there, and the Theist Priest is going to go last. The reason for this is that the Militia can Vanguard up 18 inches. For some reason, I thought the Priest slowed them down, but that's not the case. When you look at Servite, it says that currently attached character stands also add +1 march, so that makes the Priest march 6 as well. So what you can do is you can march the militia up 18 inches, and the Priest could shoot the Holy Fire another 10 inches. So if he's moving the Strix into the middle of the board, they could just get nuked immediately, which would be a huge advantage. Alright, so there's Chris getting his army ready, and I unfortunately have to go first, so the Rangers are moving to the middle of the board. I'm trying not to move up too far, because I'm worried about the Strix just rolling up, and then in their second activation, if he wins the roll next turn, he can just charge me, and it's quite hard to get these guys out of combat, and these guys are terrible in combat, and I've invested so many points in making them good at shooting. With that in mind, the Squires just coming up nearby just to help out. I just feel like if he is going to make that play with the Strix, I just want to have a unit nearby that can potentially help out. The Biomancer with 5 force-grown drones, this is on my left flank. He's just getting ready to roll down one side and make a nuisance of himself. So on my right here, we've got the Theist Priest. I really wish I'd been able to see the location of the Strix first, but my opponent knows that, and he just doesn't want to get blasted. I also sort of thought about putting this unit on the other side next to the Rangers, just so that I could use them as a way of popping Holy Fire onto that, but I also felt like I needed something for this particular flank here, because we're playing head-to-head, and this is the side of the battlefield where this zone grants 3 points, and over here you're just trying to defend your home zone, so I felt like I needed some presence on that area, otherwise he'd just get away with the scoring too quickly. Now, of course, the Biomancer Warlord with the 7 force-grown drones heading towards the Priest there, and this worries me a bit, because if he does put his buffs on the drones and they charge me, he could even consider using Burnout. That would probably do a lot of damage to his drones, but either way, the Militia don't really fight very well, except for that one turn where they get Blessed and Elysian Fragment, so it's kind of high stakes over here. Now, the play with the Strix is indeed to march them up. He's trying to put them in a position where it'll be hard for me to move up and shoot them. But the thing is that the threat range of those Rangers is just so long, because they have that liquid formation. So if you look at this, the Rangers here, and you know what, I might just go and grab a little G-Ink thing, just so I can sort of show the how this goes. Whoops. So if we grab G-Ink, this is the Rangers' position here, but the thing is they can quite easily reform in a long line like that at the start of my next turn, and then they can move up, say, 5 inches there, and if that puts them within 12, what's going to happen is that I'm going to be shooting these Strix at like 3s to hit, rerolling 6s because of Eye of Akelus, and these guys do not have a particularly good resolve value. If we go and have a look at that army list, these guys are evasion 2, which is nice, but resolve 1. So if I get any hits on them with aim for the head, murderous volley, that's going to delete this unit straight away. The Biomancer probably will be too slow to catch up, and then this unit can go after the Biomancer's unit, and it's just going to snowball into a massive lead for me. So I felt like he's risking a lot here. The play that he wants to make, of course, is the play where he basically wins the roll, marches 10 inches up with the Strix, charges in the flank, and then these guys here are just so bad at fighting, and they'd have to combat reform, and these guys can't see them right now. It's just going to take me ages to deal with the Strix, and then in his next turn he can burn them out, wipe this unit out, which is a great trade for them, and that's a big leg up in the game. So pretty high stakes stuff indeed. Okay, now let me just jump back to my photos here. Excuse me. All right. Temporarily, but sidetracked. Here we go. Okay, so that's just what we looked at. In the next turn, I'm wanting to activate the Imperial Officer first, of course, because of that play I just talked about. So I have Akelus onto the Rangers, they move up, wipe out the Strix. Noble Lord wastes some time, Spires, the Squires can go look after something else, and the Theist Priest is going to go last because at the moment the Force-Grown Drones with the Biomancer are just out of range, so I want the ability to move and Holy Fire or simply just attack them. So he does win the roll. This is pretty crucial, and again, I feel like if he lost this roll, then I'd just be in such a big lead for this game. But it didn't happen, so I've now got to figure out a way of dealing with it. They're not attacking this turn, but I've then got to activate my officer. He's also got his Pheromones over here, putting up some sort of buff ability. I had used my officer really to basically do nothing, so in the next activation... just a quick point here that I decided it's optional to immediately activate the Rangers, and because I wanted to go last with the Priest, I decided to buy a bit of time with the Officer's activation, not achieving anything. But when the Rangers activate, I had to do a combat reform, which was luckily a pass, otherwise I would have taken some damage. These guys can then attack at Clash 1, so they only do a couple of hits to the little Strix here, which causes me some hits from Lethal Demise. The Officer himself can put in a couple of hits, and I did luckily manage to take down one single stand. But I still have to deal with them, and they could still potentially burn out next turn. Over here, we have the Biomancer just moving a bit closer and putting up some abilities on his own unit. The Pheromancer driving up the field a little bit more, just trying to get into position where it could potentially, like if the Strix fight the Rangers for long enough, the Pheromancer's unit can get in there and get into combat, and that's going to be a whole new wave of problems. So with that in mind, if you look at the position of the Squires in this photo, I'll just grab that pen again. So they are going to march around to here, and this is a double march, and they're going to set up right here. By the way, these fences and stuff, this is all cosmetic. That's not part of the game. We just move it up. It's for the photos only. So they're facing, as you can see, is like that. So where they're facing this side of the battlefield, this puts the Squires in the flank, and they do have opportunists, so that is the play here for the Squires. So you can see there, next turn, we're both going to be focused on winning the roll so that we can attack the Strix and the Biomancer and everything. And if I get this card off before he gets the Pheromancer to do anything, the opportunist attacks on the flank will ignore the shield. I'll get the rerolls. He's got to reroll his resolve checks. This is going to be extremely powerful. Marksman clones, though, moving on and getting to shoot the Squires because he sees what I'm going to be going for, and he wants to use this as an opportunity to reduce the power of the Squires a bit. Luckily for me, he doesn't get all 4 wounds onto them. He does damage them quite badly, but just the one stand injured, not losing any horses at this point. Reinforcements. The Knights show up with the Noble Lord, and they're getting into a position where, if I need to, I can charge the Strix and clear them out with impact hits. I've got defense 4 on the Knights, so they won't take too much damage from Lethal Demise. That'll be brilliant. And then I can simply move the Rangers past the Knights and shoot at the Pheromancer's unit, which I should be able to do a lot of damage if I can get within 12 inches once again, but Akelus will be really helpful there. Over here, my opponent moving into range of the objective zone, which has a 4.5-inch radius. This is the 9-inch objective zone mission. This is head-to-head we're playing here, so it's sort of looking like that. What he's doing is he's just measuring to see how far away the militia will be. I will be able to charge here with my movement of 6 if I also roll another 6, because he's just slightly beyond 11 inches. Obviously the perspective of the camera angle is not really showing that the 11 sort of comes down to the ground like that. But the thought here is that he doesn't want to be charged with the whole smite bonus and everything like that in this situation. So when we do eventually get to the militia, I thought about going for the 6 with the reroll, but then I'd potentially be using the activation from the priest a bit too early. And in this particular turn, the priest is activating after the Militia anyway, so I'm not going to be able to get the full momentum of the Elysian Fragment. So after thinking about it quite carefully, I decided to double march the Militia so that they're within 1 inch of this large block of force-grown drones. This is very high-stakes stuff. Another reason why I did this is because they contest the objective this way, because he's got like 3 stands in range of the objective. I've now got like 6 stands in range of it. So this means that even though I don't score because I'm a light regiment, he can't score either, so I'm saving myself 3 points, which is a big deal. If I win the roll next turn, the priest will cast Blessed on the Militia. They will then charge. He will use an Elysian Fragment, and they will inflict approximately 20 wounds, which will then inflict a whole bunch of resolve checks, and that should delete his force-grown drone unit completely. If he wins the roll, he's going to Biomancer the drones and then attack me. If he does not use Burnout, I probably will survive, maybe with a few stands there, and I can at least trade a little bit of damage. And it may also mean that I get to activate something else elsewhere on the field. So overall, this is a good play. It's a very expensive unit I'm using, but it's also a very important unit for him as well, and this is the Warlord. So one really important thing, and I didn't realize this at the time, I didn't realize how good of a play I was making, but it did turn out to be even better because the reward for me here is really, really good. The proximity sensors here, that's only if he's on the battlefield, I believe. He's got to be able to do that. Let me just check this. Oh, sorry, this one. While this Warlord's on the battlefield, all regiments in your army can use Burnout if they want to. So if the Warlord goes down, he loses one of the key pieces of his entire strategy. So you can see the order of activation going into turn 3. The priest has to go first. I really need to win that roll, and then after he's wiped out the force-grown drones, I'm expecting the Strix to bash me up pretty badly. But the thing is, the Strix won't use Burnout. I didn't realize that at the time, but that's why this is so effective. The Squires have such a great opportunity to go into the side of the force-grown drones, so they are next. And then the Knights, if they don't clear out the Strix, what they can do, I mean, if the Strix have got used Burnout, then they'll be gone anyway, but if they need to, they clear out the Strix, and then the officer puts Akelus on the ranges. They go after the Ferromancer, or what's left of the unit after the Squires activate, and then everything else comes in after that, including the reinforcements. So this is the one turn of the game where I won the roll. And I thought this was like the really crucial play here, but it turned out that my opponent wasn't going to activate the Biomancer anyway. His first card was the Strix, because he really wanted to kill my Warlord and delete my really powerful ranged unit, and he didn't care about the Biomancer for some reason. So even though I won the roll, I just want to say that in terms of player performance and decisions here, what happens here would have happened anyway. I did, of course, get Blessed off, use Elysian Fragment, inflicted approximately 20 wounds on his unit, and completely deleted them. I should add that they are still partly damaged because of the Holy Fire from last turn, with the Priest blasting them after the Militia double marched up. I also considered using Blessed on the rerolls for armor saves against Lethal Demise, because that way I keep some of my unit around, but the problem with doing that is that if you leave the Biomancer alive with a couple of units, then he can use Burnout on the Strix this turn, and he can use Regeneration to heal some of the drones back. Next turn I won't have access to Smite anymore. It was just too risky, so I just went all in on the attacks. That does mean I take 20 Lethal Demise hits, and that deleted my unit as well. But it's just such a good trade, because when you look at the battlefield here, lower down in the photo where this objective is, that's where those 2 units previously were. There's just complete pool of blood there, an ocean of just blood and guts. Now I can move in with my heavies and take that zone later. He's not going to score anything for a while. That's amazing. And for the rest of the game, I've got access to my Warlord's ability, which is Vanguard, and he's got no access to the Burnout, and that was sort of the whole plan. So that play there really shifts things. So over here, the Squires charging into the side of the Ferromancer's unit and doing a world of damage here as well, with opportunists, of course, but not quite killing the unit, because he did make some good saves there. Next up, his Marksman clones, or the second unit Marksman clones, moves on nearby and shoots at these Squires, doing even more damage to them. So I've got one stand alive and one that's taken 3 wounds. As you can see here, the Ferromancer's unit's almost wiped out there, which is pretty huge. The Strix now get charged by the Knights, but because the Strix didn't have the advantage of burnout, they didn't really do any damage to the Rangers, so I've still got an intact unit of Rangers. I've lost 1 standard Rangers, so when the Knights charge them, they easily wipe out the Strix and take maybe like 1 wound from lethal demise. And then with their second action, they just they march to the left, like away from the Rangers to give them more space, so the Rangers can move past, which is amazing. The Ferromancer now activates, and I think he just brings back a bunch of force-grown drones or something like that. No, can't quite remember what happened here. I think he was going to put some sort of buff up, Tenacious or something like that. So when the Rangers move in, I decided to use Fire in Advance so I can move back out of range of the Marksman clones. This was a mistake. Big blunder on my part. What I was supposed to have done here is to use Murderous Volley so that I could ensure that all of the force-grown drones would die. What ended up happening is I shot a round of shots here, didn't roll very well, and when we realized that the Ferromancer had Tenacious, he actually kept this unit alive with just 1 wound left, which would not have happened, or would have been very unlikely to have happened if I'd used Murderous Volley. So lesson learned, and that unfortunately means that, you know, now we're just having to have these shootouts with the Marksman clones, I should say, and the Ferromancer is going to bring back some drones, so that's painful. Over here, the men-at-arms are moving on my right-hand flank to the zone where the Militia and the Biomancer previously had their battle, so just rolling up on the right side of this church here. This little unit here is going to be so good at screening for my Crimson Tower Knights and Ashen Dawn or Steel Legion, so just love these little guys. I think after the patch, I'll be taking them more frequently than I take Mercenary Crossbowmen. The Crossbowmen are amazing, but these guys just play such a valuable role now with screening and objective capturing. And as you can see, if I manage to crush this flank, this is the cheapest way possible that I can just hold onto those 3 points around while going after the rest of his army, so that's great. To counter that, he's moving in with his 3 brute drones over here, just marching their way up. They'll be quite good at killing the men-at-arms, although they don't actually have burnout and they don't have cleave. So the men-at-arms can at least block half the damage. Abomination now rolling around the right-hand flank, and this is kind of like the play I was expecting him to make, really. The Abomination will do quite well against the men-at-arms in the long run, but if the men-at-arms are screening some really big, heavy units that I'm going to be bringing along, this little bug here should be quite easy to stomp on, and then the rest of the flank will be even easier. All right, over here, the Ferromancer activating, doing some damage to the little Squire boy there, and I believe recovering his unit. On this side, this is through the middle, really. That house in the background, you can, if you look at the top of the photo, you can see the men-at-arms behind that house. On the other side here, we have the Crimson Tower Knights. They're marching up the board, but staying just out of range of the Marksman clones. The Marksman clones can march 5, shoot 22, so I'm just staying out of that 27-inch threat range. I want to conserve these guys for a while. They do have 5 wounds now, so they're a bit tougher, but the plan is to double march next turn or march charge, and just trying to hit some of his backline units since the meat is starting to go away for the Spires. So, turn 1. Sorry, not turn 1. This is approximately turn 4, I think. We have the Rangers activating first. They're going to be trying to go after the Ferromancer's unit. The Spires, the Squires, not the Spires. The Squires, I really only have 1 guy left, so he's just there to get out of the way. And through the middle of the turn, I'll just be wasting time with the characters and then bringing in the heavy stuff. You can see my Ashen Dawn, Steel Legion, and Crimson Tower activating last. So this is a look at the battlefield going into turn 4. You can see there that the points on the right-hand side are going to be up for grabs. It's going to be men-at-arms versus the brute drones with the Abomination coming around the side. I'm feeling good about this flank because I'm still yet to bring on the Ashen Dawn, and that's going to make a world of difference, and even the Steel Legion if I want to. On the left-hand side, I should be able to deal with the Ferromancer, and the Knights can at least block him from taking my objective for a really long time. So, just happy with how the game's going, but he does still have some more stuff, Vanguard clones, etc. So we'll see how that works out. Over here, the Ferromancer has brought a bunch of guys back, and just fighting off the Squire boy here. The Squire's actually managing to hold his own with his armor 3. The Rangers piling a whole bunch of extra shots into the Ferromancer now, but still not managing to get the job done, sadly. Just something about the dice rolls over here. Right, and that's the overview of them. You can see that they're in range of that Marksman clones unit over the left there. So with the shootout, the Marksman clones are going to be better at that because they've got much longer range. So yeah, it's going to be a bit of a predicament there for the Rangers, but I'm glad that they're alive. I still feel like this is a very powerful unit, and every turn that you get Akelus and a bunch of shots off, they are very, very powerful. And they always have that play in their pocket where they can get Murderous Volley if they come close enough, and they're just so mobile with Liquid Formation to get that happening. Over here, so the Squire is deleted, and that's because at the time we thought that this unit had Cascading Degeneration. This is a mistake. My opponent just messed it up and says, oh, okay, my Vagmancer has Cascading Degeneration. He does not. It's actually the High Clone Executor that does have it. So I removed my Squire here when realistically I should have actually had him locking down the combat for longer. So that is a misplay which advantaged my opponent for forgetting. But to make up for it later in the game when I'm fighting against his Vanguard clones, we just decided to play it that they don't have the Cascading Degeneration, which is a disadvantage to him because we've already used it once on one of his regiments. So a bit of a misplay there, a bit of a shame that happened, but it is what it is. A small unit of bound clones just coming in behind the brute drones on this side to help screen. I don't really know what these guys are going to do, but if they can maybe delay the Crimson Tower Knights a turn or just get into the flank or something to hold things up or score later in the game, they do have their uses. On the other side here, this is the other unit of brute drones coming through behind the Vagmancer's unit. They are eventually going to be fighting the Knights. The Knights, to be honest, aren't going to have a very easy time beating them just because the Knights are just like Clash 2. Once the combat sort of just gets a bit bogged down, the brute drones will hurt them quite badly, especially with the marksman clones shooting over the top. You can see some drones in the top left there. That's the dead pile that aren't actually in play. So over here, this is the main event. The Vanguard clones with the High Clone Executor doing their triple march with Vanguard, coming in right here behind the Vagmancer's unit. So once the Vagmancer is gone, these guys can move through and threaten the 4-point objective on my side of the table. Over here, the Men-at-Arms doing the bold play, which is to double march so that they're in range of the objective. This is going to force my opponent to move something into contest. I feel like the Abomination, if it goes march charge, won't get much damage done, and then the Ashen Dawn will be in a position to deal with it later. If he comes through the front to try and contest the objective, he'll actually only very slowly damage the Men-at-Arms, and I do have the Crimson Tower Knights on their way, so this is an expendable unit, and my opponent just suffers such a great loss of positioning if he attacks them, and that's another reason I just love these little boys. Over this side, the Marksman clones continuing to move up. They are just trying to get into a position where they can either shoot the Rangers or the Crimson Tower Knights as they come close. You can barely see it, but on the far left of the photo, there are some stands there. This is the direction that the Crimson Tower Knights are going to be coming in through the center. All right, over here, this play was kind of interesting. The Knights march and then charge the Vagmancer's unit. I told my opponent that I needed a 2+ to get this, and I have the standard bearer for the reroll, but if I failed it with a 1-1, it would mean that I couldn't actually move them through the Rangers, because they had to sort of clip them. And if I'd rolled a 1-1 here, it would have resulted in me not charging the Vagmancer, and the Rangers and also the Knights would both have been broken. So you don't really want to risk that. I know that there's only a 1 in 36 chance of that happening, but I decided to make the play anyway because even if that had have happened, the game's just going so well on the other side of the board that I feel like I could have just used the Knights in a later turn to rally and just get in the way of the objective and eventually die. The Steel Legion show up, and I just could have made a showing of it. So even with them rolling a 1-1, I felt like I could have still won the game. But if I successfully charge here, it eliminates the Vagmancer's unit, blocks the path of the Vanguard's next turn and the Steel Legion coming behind them, and I can sort of set up a brawl and still have that happen clear of the objective. On this side, we have the brute drones marching and then charging the Men-at-Arms, doing some impact hits. But at defense 3, we're not really losing them either. So this is a way for my opponent to contest the objective, and if he brings in his Abomination, he can also score. The Ashen Dawn double marching onto the field here. The real problem for my opponent now is that he's just got no cleave, and the Abomination and the Brute Drones can double team the Ashen Dawn and they'll still lose. The Ashen Dawn are going to completely steamroll this flank, and if there are any men-at-arms left at all, they can score while the Ashen Dawn move into the backfield. So this is sort of like the finishing move. Over here, the Abomination, realizing that he can't do very much, decides to march sideways twice, that's 10 inches, to clip the zone there. So at the end of this turn, at least he will score by having the Abomination plus the Brute Drones against just my men-at-arms. On the other side of the field, a group of Steel Legion triple marching with Vanguard right up the board here. The thinking is that if he wins the roll next turn and the Vanguard clones charge the Knights and wipe them out, I could still try for a charge clash with the Steel Legion. I'd need to get a decent roll, but I've at least got the reroll there. And the Rangers are in position to shoot them too. And if I can eventually slow this flank down, there's going to come a point like in 3 or 4 turns from now where my cavalry from the right-hand side of the table will catch up. So, speaking of which, I barely had enough distance for this, but I managed to get the Crimson Tower Knights thundering around the church building and then charging with their second action and just barely getting into the flank of the Brute Drones. It was close, but thankfully they could get into the flank, and that is just so punishing because it means next turn I can activate Blessed, meaning they're going to be quite tough. They're now wounds 5 instead of 4, thank God. But the brutal impacts and the terrifying in the flank of the Brute Drones is just crushing, and these guys just took a world of damage. It means that with the one command stand of Crimson Towers within range of the objective, I end up scoring as well. So that's a massive lead, just getting all those points at the end of that turn. So coming into this turn here, the Knights must go first because they can just charge clash the Vanguards. Then the Crimson Tower Knights can go against the Abomination, and the Ashen Dawn will go last and just do the cleanup. Same with the Steel Legion, of course. My opponent does win the dice roll. He does win pretty much every supremacy roll except for that one that really counted earlier in the game against the Biomancer. So the Vanguards do charge in here, but the thing is that they're up against Defense 4, not really much cleave, and the Knights are reduced down to just one Knight left over, and they are broken. But they're now sort of just holding up the battlefield. They're sort of slowing the Spires down for a while, which is great, to be honest. I'm kind of happy with it. The Abomination then gets a charge in against the Crimson Tower Knights, but these Knights have Blessed, so the Abomination does pretty much nothing. They are then able to do a combat reform and clash him, which is devastating because they are just, base clash 3 and they've got the commander in there. And they have Terrifying, so the Abomination just gets whacked. Over here we have the Rangers trying to shoot point blank at the Vanguards. Unfortunately, the Vanguards have Bastions, so it's quite harder to cut into them and very little damage is done. And sadly for me, that does put me in range of those Marksman clones for the long-range shooting. Over here, the Militia, sorry, not the Militia, the Men-at-Arms are reforming a little bit and just coming into range of that objective. There is a hill just above us there where that will help protect me against his units, his shooting, even though he's got Arcing Fire, just prevents the sort of the aim shot. So for the rest of the game, these Men-at-Arms are just going to be able to score 3 points for the least number of points investment possible. And this is just an exemplary game of why Men-at-Arms are amazing. There are plenty of games where they don't perform well, but the expected value in the long run is that they're an extra card, they're an extra activation, they screen for 1 turn, and then they can score very cheaply. Very useful unit. So over here, the Marksman clones are aiming and shooting at this corner guy here, the Crimson Tower. He loses 4 wounds, and in the previous edition of the game, that would have been enough to kill the stand. It is now not. He stays there. I'm so stoked about that. It's exactly the change that the Crimson Towers needed. So, Bound clones just moving behind the hill. I don't know really what they're going to be doing there other than sort of like delaying me for a bit. The Steel Legion reforming and moving up a bit so that next turn, if I win the roll, I can then charge through the forest. I'll lose Inspired. I'm not veterans, but with the sheer number of attacks, that should do a crippling amount of damage to the Vanguard clones, and then I can get charged by the Brute Drones, but then again, the forest is going to prevent Inspired. It's going to prevent impact hits, and I should be able to brawl my way through it in the late game. He does anticipate that exact play, so he's moving around with the Brute Drones so that they too can fit past the unit of Vanguard clones. So that forest there is going to be, we're probably going to be cutting down some trees there in a way. Over this side, the Ashen Dawn do another double march here, and this flank is just completely gone for Spires, so it's just 3 points for 100 Kingdoms per turn for the rest of the game. that is the final photo of that turn. You can sort of see that the game is over. On the left-hand flank, it would just take him too long to get to this objective here. And on the right-hand side one, I'm going to get 3 points a turn. And what's going to be happening is that these cavalry units are going to be overrunning his backline, and I'll eventually get to his backline objective at the same time he gets to mine. So that's how we're playing it. Steel Legion attacking here, doing a bunch of damage to the Vanguard clones. There's a nice front photo of them. The marksman clones shooting at the knights. Hilariously, they move up and shoot me. They only need to do 1 wound, and they've got like 16 shots or something. So they move up to get into range, and they blast me with all of their bows. And this is the dice roll from the knights. They need 4s or less. Even if they had armor piercing, which they don't, mind you, this passes every single roll. And it was just like, you know, the forehead slap moment where so the knights are still not dead. So they now activate and they rally and they attack the Vanguard clones unit. It's just getting silly at this point. So the the Vanguard clones now attack back. They do kill the knights, do a bit of damage to the Steel Legion. Ashen Dawn marching, charging, wiping out these bound clones from the side. Brute drones going in against the Steel Legion. I've got Oblivious. I've got Defense 3, so I'm surviving for a little while here. Crimson Tower Knights moving around, just getting in range to go after the marksman clones at the back. Or I should say, just reforming into getting to a better spot here. So they'll still get shot. And the men-at-arms just still camping, just farming those points, grabbing the objective. On this side, the Ashen Dawn basically wiped out the clones. They try to attack back, but of course they can't do any damage whatsoever. In last turn here, Steel Legion trying to go first. They lose the roll, so the brute drones are kind of beating them up there. And same with the Vanguard clone guy. I think I managed to get an attack back off on him and took him down before I lost the unit. So that is his last laugh there. Beautiful little miniature, quite like the sculpt, and the paint job's pretty good too. Over this side, so I've got the Crimson Tower Knights. They don't really need to go after the marksman clones because the Ashen Dawn are about to clean their clock. So there it is there. Ashen Dawn in this photo do 1 clash against the bound clones and then use their second action to charge and impact hits, deleting most of the Vanguard clones from the flank there with the rerolled resolve checks. On this side, his marksman clones can now move past, but this is the only 2 units he's really got left. So the Crimson Tower Knights just diverting and marching around to cut them off. And that's basically going to be it. This is where game is called. You can sort of see that if the game went on for another 2 turns, he would lose everything. And I can be scoring from this right-hand side and the left-hand side there as well. And, you know, we hadn't even got to the last couple of turns. The game was basically conceded in turn 8. And by then, the score was 34-18. So, great game there. Really enjoyed it. It did turn out to be a bit one-sided for 100 Kingdoms after a while, but there were a few things early game there weren't there, which could have really swung things. So, the Spires getting into the flank there for the Rangers, what could have happened is that the burnout could have gone on the Spires, deleted the Rangers, and that's a big, heavy unit that I wouldn't have had for the rest of the game. It's a chunk of points. I feel like the Biomancer probably could have waited for a bit of backup before going against the Militia. The Militia, very dangerous unit at the moment, but the thing is, if you wait a bit, or if you have the Biomancer elsewhere on the table, the Militia is only going to beat one thing, and then you know, you can come in and hit it with a unit of brute drones or something and take it down later. And that allows them to continue using the Biomancer's ability throughout the game and eventually going after the Crimson Towers and the Ashen Dawn with something which can burn out. Also, if you can delay a bit more in the midfield, then the Marksman clones are also very, very good at shooting down the heavy cavalry at the end as well. But overall, 100 Kingdoms in a great spot. I feel like Spires, in order to beat them, probably the better way is to use stuff with a bit more armor piercing and cleave. I do still like the build with the Lineage Highborn with Fermentic Override, Cascading Degeneration, etc., Incarnate Sentinels, Infiltrator, the Infiltration Vanguard clone guys. Can't remember what they're actually called. Spires do have some good builds, but props to my opponent for trying this particular Directorate one. I do think that it has a lot of potential, but probably not the best matchup in this particular case. And next game, we're going to be trying out some more heavy infantry with the officer going into the Guild Legion instead. So stay tuned for that one. And yeah, we'll see you soon.